Chapter 10. Origin. Emma placed a cup of tea and some biscuits in front of Penelope. Enjoy. Emma smiled and went to settle beside Sean. Thank you, dear, Penelope said and took a sip. Lovely tea, she smiled.
So, about what you said.
Grayson asked, hesitatingly. Oh. Penelope placed her tea on her lap. Let me think, she said, thought for a while. Oh, yes, that one. Well, I was one of your mother's friends. The day before she gave birth to Sebastian and Bethany, Penelope took a sip of her tea. She and her husband came to my doorstep and asked for my help. I accepted the offer and went with them back to the castle. Luckily, I went with them, Penelope said, and took another sip of her tea. Or they won't be here with us right now. Penelope pointed at Sebastian. Sebastian heard the pitter-patter of little feet and something jumped into his lap.
Sebastian!
They cried.
Red, Snow, what's wrong?
Sebastian asked.
We heard that Bethany was injured, so we came looking for you to ask how is she.
Red said, nuzzling Sebastian's hands.
And?
He asked.
How is she?
They shouted again. Sebastian laughed.
She's fine. She's healing fast, and no, you can't visit her. She's sleeping.
Sebastian said, then he heard someone clear their throat. He looked up and saw everyone looking at him weirdly except Grayson, who was smiling at him, and Penelope, who was looking at the foxes weirdly.
What?
Sebastian asked, confused. Oh, nothing, just the fact that you're talking to two foxes, Quinn said.
Oh, that! I don't know how to explain it to you guys.
Sebastian said, scratching the back of his head.
I can.
Grayson said. How? Quinn asked. Grayson wrapped his arm around her shoulder and Quinn leans into him.
I don't know much, but I found a diary when I was young and was exploring the castle. It was left by our ancestors, and it said that when the moon goddess made the original werewolves, she gave them powers to protect themselves in the world full of hunters.
Grayson said.
The goddess went across the world to find humans that she found worthy to receive the powers. From the diary I found, there was a poem. She, who is friend with the sun, became the successor of Snow, an icy and sharp gaze that pierced your soul. Cold and ice now her forever companions. He, who was the red dragon, scales replaced by a midnight blanket, but his eyes remain gold and fierce, soul remains bright and burning. He, who resides in the rainbow, tunic bright compared to skin, with orbs as blue as the ocean, words as persuasive as Aphrodite's. She, who lived with Uncle Sam, redness from her cheek spread, a pair of beautiful amethysts joined. Friends with flora and fauna she was.
The four royals, Ramona said beside Sebastian.
Yes, so you know the wolves then?
It was Randolph who nodded.
The white wolf, the black wolf, the gold wolf, and finally yours, the red wolf. It seems like they inherit the latter rather than the former.
Grayson smiled.
Does that mean you got the ladder?
Sebastian asked. Grayson gave a cheeky smile. Then he turned his gaze to the dying flower beside Emma and narrowed his eyes. Just like that, the flower stood up straighter, and new and healthier petals replaced the old and dried one.
That isn't a houseplant. It's an outdoor one, and it needs sunlight, not just water.
Ah, so that was the problem. Thank you, Ramona thanked.
It's fine.
Grayson smiled. Then Randolph suddenly snapped his fingers.
No wonder.
What? Ramona asked her twin.
Remember how they were able to hear and speak to us despite them not connected to the pack?
Ramona thought for a while before her face lit up with realization.
What? What about us not connected to the pack?
Sebastian asked, amused. Well, look at it this way. Like a group chat. You can't read or reply if you're not in the group unless we invited you into the group, Ramona explained to him.
That's why I was shocked when Bethany heard a comment that she wasn't supposed to hear.
That is?
Sebastian asked, a sly smile spread on his face. Randolph blushed.
Not related to you.
He glared at Sebastian. Sebastian raised his hands in surrender.
Okay, chill.
Sebastian said, a sly smile still on his face. I don't think us shifting into our wolves are counted as an animal, Quinn said. It does, Penelope piped up.
It does?
Randolph asked, and Penelope nodded. It doesn't matter if you're half animal or fully is one, as long as you have an animal spirit living inside of you. Sebastian and Bethany can speak to you through mind link, Penelope said. Then she pointed at the foxes, eyes narrowed in concentration. Where did you find them? She asked.
One night when they stole my cereal.
Sebastian replied.
Why? Is something wrong?
Yes, I think there is. She stood up and placed her hands on top of the foxes' heads and sighed. Just as I expected, she said, and sat back down.
What did you expect?
Sebastian asked. They're not normal foxes, she said.
Then are they...
He trailed off. She shook her head. They're not shifters, too, she said. What? If they're not normal foxes and they're not shifters, too, then what are they? Someone spoke behind them. Sebastian turned around and he brightened when he saw who it was.
Bethany, you're up.
He said. Then she tackled in a hug. The person pulled away, revealing a very happy Randolph.
You okay?
He asked. I'm perfectly fine, Bethany said and smiled. But then she was tackled by two furballs. Bethany! They shouted and started to lick Bethany's face. Hey, you guys, she said and patted their heads. I heard Quinn healed me. Thank you, Bethany said to Quinn. Quinn waved it off. I barely did anything. You healed yourself. Trust me, you did a lot, Bethany smiled. Quinn smiled. Well, you're most welcome then,
So, how long have you been standing there?
Sebastian asked, once Bethany sat down beside Randolph. Not long, just when Penelope asked you about the foxes, Bethany said. Talking about the foxes, how are the foxes, well, foxes, when they're not shifters or an actual fox? Bethany asked. I don't know, but I know someone who does, Penelope said.
Who?
Sebastian asked. An old friend of mine. Her name is Bruja, Penelope said. Bruja? Ramona said. No, Bruja. It means witch in Spanish, Penelope said. Why would someone name themselves as witch in Spanish? Bethany asked. Because she's the first ever witch to be born. Plus, she's Spanish, and people started calling her that after an incident. Her real name long lost and forgotten, Penelope said and sipped her tea. What, like, legit the first ever witch? Bethany asked. Yup, Penelope said, popping up the pea. Wow, so when can you help us tell her that we need her help? Bethany asked. Oh, we can just go now. She's always free, Penelope said, placing down her tea.
Now? Like right now?
Sebastian asked and looked out the window.
But it's already night.
Yeah. Why not go in the morning after a good night rest?
Randolph asked. Sure, why not? Meet you guys tomorrow in the living room, she said, and poofed away. Wow, that was fast, Ramona mumbled.
King, please, just Grayson will be fine. Okay, Grayson, it's quite late. Would you like a room to stay with your mate?
Randolph asked.
There's no need for that, as we will return now. The castle is not that far away.
Grayson said and stood up.
Okay then, travel safely.
Randolph said and smiled.
Thank you for having us.
He said to Emma and Sean. Oh, it's fine, dear. Travel safely, Emma said and smiled. Grayson went to hug both Sebastian and Bethany.
We will meet again someday. Until then, stay safe.
They both hugged Grayson and nodded. Grayson patted their heads and gave them one last smile before he and Quinn walked out of the house, hand in hand. Bethany followed Randolph upstairs and into a spacious room. Nice room, she commented as she looked around the room.
Thanks, it's mine.
Randolph said. Wait, am I going to stay in the same room as you? Bethany asked.
Why, is something wrong?
He asked, sounding hurt. Bethany thought about it a second. You know what? No, there's nothing wrong, she said. Randolph smiled.
Good, because your belongings are already in the closet.
He said. Thanks, Bethany said shyly and went into the walk-in closet. She locked the door and changed into more comfy clothes and walked out. She blushed furiously when she saw Randolph wearing nothing but a pair of boxers. He turned around and smirked.
See something you like?
He asked. Bethany cleared her throat. Nah, Sebastian has better ones. Randolph's eyes flashed slyly.
Oh, really?
He walked over to her, but she dodged under his arms and jumped into bed. She then proceeds to cover her face with the blanket. Bethany heard him chuckle, and her blush darkens. The other side of the bed sank as a pair of warm arms wrapped around her waist as they pulled her closer to their owner. Bethany turned around and buried her head into the crook of his neck and breathed in his scent. The smell of sea breeze washed over my nose, and she sighed.
Night, Beth.
Randolph said, and kissed Bethany's forehead. Night. Let's just say that was the best sleep she ever had. The next morning, after they had their breakfast, they met Penelope in the living room. Hold on tight, this is going to be a bumpy ride, she said, and they disappeared through thin air. Penelope was right. Right when they disappeared, it felt like someone picked you up and started shaking like there's tomorrow. After a while, the shaking stopped, and now it felt like they're falling out from the sky. When Bethany opened her eyes, and they were falling from the sky. Ah, Penelope, do something! She shouted at Penelope. Gelada Latulo! Penelope shouted, and opened her palm towards the ground. Then they fell onto something squishy. Bethany opened her eyes and saw that she's on top of a bed that was made out of... jelly? Then something arrayed her, someone fell on her back. Oof!
Why is it soft?
A voice that is all so familiar said. Bethany lifted her head and shouted, "'Cause you're on top of me, you baboon! Get off!" Randolph looked down at me and quickly get off me,
Sorry, didn't see you there.
he said, and helped her up. She glared at him and pushed her hair away from her face.
Incoming!
Someone shouted from above. Bethany quickly pulls Randolph aside and landed on the squishy stuff beside them with Sebastian.
Thanks.
Randolph said from underneath her. Sure, Bethany whispered and looked into his beautiful eyes and felt that she was sucked in as she leans into his face, with him doing the same. They got closer and closer until...
Perfect landing.
Sebastian said from beside them, not until Ramona landed on top of him.
Not so perfect landing.
He groaned at Ramona, who was sitting on Sebastian's back. Bethany rolled her eyes at her twin and helped Randolph up. You all right? Ramona asked after she helped Sebastian up.
Yep, I'm fine. Don't worry about it.
He said, but Ramona was still worried. Young love. They jumped at the voice, and Bethany rolled her eyes again when she saw Penelope between her and Randolph. Really? Bethany asked, exasperated. Everyone all right? Penelope shouted. Randolph winced at the volume. They all noted, then Ramona piped up. Wait, where's Red and Snow?
Here.
Red groaned. Bethany turned and saw him with Snow's butt on his head a few feet away. You all right? Bethany asked.
Yep, just get her off of me. She's heavy.
He said. Hey! Snow exclaimed. Bethany chuckled and picked both of them up. Found them! Bethany shouted and went to join the others. So, where's Bruja's house? Ramona asked. Over here, a voice said. Bruja, how have you been? It's been so long, Penelope said and hugged Bruja. When Bruja and Penelope broke their hug, Bethany's eyes widened when she took a closer look at Bruja. She was nothing like the witches from movies. Bruja was beautiful, with not-so-tanned skin, green eyes, auburn hair, and she doesn't have a big nose with a mole on it. She doesn't look past 20. I'm fine. What brings you here? Bruja asked, with an accented voice. Then she looked over Penelope and saw the others. We need your help with something, Penelope said. Like what? Bruja asked. Breaking a curse, Penelope said, and pointed at the foxes in Bethany's hands. I see. Follow me, she said, and walked into her house that was not there a while ago. This way, she said, and led them inside a dark room. Why did you bring us here? Bethany asked. Bruja smiled and snapped her fingers. Then the whole room was lit on by candles. Put the foxes in the middle of the room, Bruja said. Here, on the carpet? Bethany asked. Yep, just put them down, Bruja said while digging stuff out from the drawer. Bethany placed the foxes down and went back to Randolph's side. So, Bruja said. She turned around with a lot of potion in her hands. Do you remember how you were turned into a fox?
No, we don't remember anything.
Red said. Translate, Bruja said and looked at Bethany. Bethany repeated what Red said. All right, she said and started adding the potions until smoke came out. She poured the mixed potion into bowls and gave them to the foxes. Drink this, Bruja ordered. Snow took a sniff. Ugh, it smells horrible. But she drinks it anyway. It was once they drank finished the whole thing when something happened.
Ugh, I don't feel good.
Red said. I'm sleepy, Snow mumbled. Then they both crumpled to the floor like a puppet that got cut off its string. Red? Snow? Bethany panicked when she saw them crumple to the floor. She turned to Bruja. What's going on? What did you do?